What's up guys, I'm Andy from 1A Auto. In this video I'm going to be replacing these rear differential carrier bearings, sometimes they call them side bearings, on this 2011 Ford F-150. If you need parts for your vehicle, click the link in the description and head over to 1aauto.com. One thing I like to do before I take a cover off is make sure the fill plug is able to come out, because if you get the cover off, put it back on, and you can't fill it up with fluid, then you're stuck. So always start with taking the fill plug out. Just use a ratchet and an extension. Pull this plug out. Take that out. There's plenty of fluid in there. All right, I'm gonna remove this cover. You wanna make sure you have a drain bucket or drain pan underneath to catch the fluid. I'm gonna use a 1/2-inch socket and an extension and a ratchet. You can try using a 13mm, but it seemed a little loose, so I'm just gonna use a 1/2-inch. On certain bolts have a stud on the top of them. You gotta just take these little wire retainers off, pull them out. If they're stuck on there, you can use a straight blade screwdriver. Pull those out of your way. So there's 3 of those. Remember the location of those. That's important when you go to put it back together. Take a deeper socket and a ratchet, and we'll take those out. Take this one out, and then I have one left. I always like to leave the top one in last. I'm gonna loosen this up. Not all the way. I'm not gonna take it out all the way, just loosen it up a good amount of turns. And then I'm gonna take a straight blade screwdriver. We're gonna get in behind the cover. I have to pry it out. The reason why I leave that bolt in is so when the cover actually comes off, then the cover doesn't go flying off. There we go. Pull that off a little bit. Pry it out. Let that fluid drain. You can check the fluid, make sure it looks okay. I don't see any large metal pieces in there. Now most of it's drained out. I'm just gonna support the cover, take that last bolt out. And you can grab the cover, and pull it off. All right, I wanna take this drive shaft off. I'm just gonna mark the drive shaft to the yoke. It's a good idea to do this to prevent vibrations. Just put it back together the way you took it off. So right there and right there. All right, I'm gonna loosen up these bolts. There's 4 of them. I'm gonna use a 12-point socket, a 12mm extension, and a ratchet, or a breaker bar. I'm gonna break them free first. I am gonna use a pry bar to prevent the drive shaft from spinning while I loosen these up. That'll relieve some of the tension on the transmission park pawl. All right, so I'm gonna take these bottom 3 bolts out, and then I can't get to the top one. So after I get these 3 out, then I'm gonna put the transmission in neutral, and then rotate the drive shaft, and then take that last one out. Take that last bolt out. I'm just gonna spin the drive shaft so that bolt is towards the bottom, like that. And then I'm gonna put the transmission back in park. And I'll take this last bolt out. Take that last bolt out. And this is still on there pretty good, so I'll just grab a pry bar, get in here. And there we go. Pull that out and just set that aside. Right, now I'm going to take the rear wheel off. I'm going to take a 21mm socket and a breaker bar, loosen up these lug nuts. Now I'll take the lug nuts off. Right, take that lug nut off. We'll take the tire off. Well, this tire's on there pretty good, so I'm just going to put a lug nut on and hit the back side with a hammer. Now I'll take that lug nut back off and remove the wheel. I'm going to take the caliper bolts out and use a 10mm wrench. Take this with the open side of the wrench because there's this damper on here that prevents vibrations. Loosen that up, and then we'll take the bottom one, loosen this one up. The top one's not going to come out all the way because of the leaf spring, but that's okay. Just as long as it's loose, then we can get the caliper off. The bottom one I can pull out completely. And I'm just going to slide the caliper up, slide it out, just like that. I can pull this screw out, this stud, so that I don't lose it. Set it aside. Then I'm going to take the brake caliper. I'm going to use one of these hangers. We sell these at 1aauto.com. I'm just going to slide it there into the frame. Slide the caliper on there. Just so it's supported. I want to make sure there's no tension on the hose. Just leave that out of your way. Then I'm going to grab the rotor and just slide it off. If the rotor's stuck on there, you can take a hammer and just hit in these areas, tap the rust off, because it'll corrode in the middle there. Then I'm going to do the same procedure for the other side. All right, so I want to take this bolt out, loosen it up, but the ring gear is just spinning. So what I'm going to do is take a 1 1/8 socket and a breaker bar, and I'm going to stick it on the pinion, hold the pinion while I loosen this up. Loosen this up. Now I can pull this bolt out. It's going to have a long stud on the end of it that holds that pin in. Right, now I'm just going to rotate the pinion. Be careful that this pin doesn't just fall out. Once I get it at about that angle, I'm just going to slide the pin out. Make sure you put it in a safe place. So with that pin out, I want to be careful that these gears don't move. These are the spider gears. You don't want them to come out because it's very hard to get them back in, and there's spacers in there and some clutches on these side. So we want to take the axle out. So I'm going to push on the axle, like that, just like that, and that gets pushed in. Then there's a little horseshoe retainer that holds it in right there. We can access that with a magnet. Just use a magnet, grab this, and you should be able to pull it out, just like that. There is a little O-ring in there that helps keep it in place. Pull that out. Now we can grab on the axle and slide it out. Just be careful, hold it up. We don't want to mess up the seal. It's a good idea to replace this seal when you do this job. These seals are brand new, so I'm not going to. Then I'm going to do the same with the other axle. So as you can see, we have gear marking compound on the ring gear. We've just checked the pattern. It's not necessary to do during removal, but it's recommended when reinstalling. So I'm going to want to take this whole differential out. I want to take these caps off, take these bolts off. You want to keep in mind which cap goes where. Mark it with a marker, or this one actually has 2 little stamps in on the top side. This one only has 1. So I know this is the left side and this is the right side. Those might not be factory, so keep in mind if yours doesn't have that, just keep in mind which one goes where. So then I'm going to take a 19mm socket and a breaker bar. I'm going to loosen these up. Take that out. Take this side out as well. I'm just going to support the carrier differential assembly just in case. It should not slide right out, but just in case it does. I'm going to pry out where the bolts are. All right, I got it loose a little bit. I'm just prying on the side of the case, pushing on the bolts, sliding that out, and just slide it out. This is very heavy, so just keep that in mind. I'm just going to grab this other shim. This came out, so keep in mind this was the passenger side. All right, I want to take this pinion yoke off. I'm just going to take 2 of the bolts, stick those 2 in there. Just going to spray a little rust penetrant on here. All right, I'm just going to use a pry bar to prevent this from spinning. And I am gonna have to use a pneumatic tool to get this off. It's a 1 1/8 socket and a air gun. All right, take that off like that. All right, I can take these bolts back out. I don't need those in there right now. All right, so I'm gonna use this puller to get this yoke off. You're just gonna have to be creative with how you get it off if you have a puller. I am just gonna use a pry bar to prevent it from twisting. And then the yoke will pull off, just like that. I'm gonna take a dead blow hammer. I am gonna use my other hand and support the pinion from the inside so that when it goes all the way in, then I can catch it. Just like that. Just slide it out. All right, so we want to take these bearings off the carrier. So you can pull the race off. We're not gonna reuse these, so we can throw these out. But we wanna pull these bearings off. They make tool kits like these, but our tool kit's too small for these bearings. What you would do is take this off, and you're supposed to clamp it under here, and then you can either put this in a press or use the other attachments to pull it off. But this one is too small, so I can't use that. And they make other style pullers to pull these bearings. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to use some air tools. I'm actually gonna cut it off with a cutting wheel and an air hammer. And I'm gonna just cut a slice in it and then use the air hammer and push it off. Right, so I am gonna take some cleaner, some brake parts cleaner, and clean this. Wipe it off with a rag. It's a good idea if you're gonna reuse your ring gear to get a damp cloth or rag and place it on the ring gear so none of the sparks affect the ring gear. We're replacing the ring gear anyway, so we're not gonna need that. So I wanna cut a little area. I wanna make sure wherever my sparks are going, they're not going into like the clutches, like in this hole here. In the area like here is actually pretty good because then you'll have more room to use the air hammer after. Make sure you have safety glasses when you're doing this. Take a screwdriver and just break this. Once you get one of these bearings out, then it comes out pretty easy. I'm trying not to cut the carrier. So. There we go. Just spread this apart. Pull that right off, just like that. All the little rollers go flying. Make sure you get them out of here. Now we want to cut this part of the bearing. Just gonna cut at an angle so that I can get deeper into it. You want to be careful when you're doing this. You don't want to cut into the carrier too much. You just want to do a nice slice right down there. All right, I did a couple different cuts. I was having a hard time getting an angle that I liked that was going to prevent me from digging into the carrier because I didn't want to cut it. I scored it just a little bit right there and a little right there. But that angle seemed to work pretty good. Now what I'm trying to do is cut it to the point where I can actually crack it. So when I use the air hammer, I'm just going to use the air hammer right here, and hopefully that'll crack, and then I can get this part of the bearing right off. Now I'll take my air hammer. Just gonna set it right there with a straight bit on it. Just hammer this away, and I can already see that it's starting to come off. You could even try starting with the air hammer and see if you get the bearing to move at all. But generally, you gotta crack the bearing. There we go. Came right off. So when we were cutting, we actually scored the carrier a little bit right there, which that's actually not bad. There's still a lot of surface there, so don't be worried if you're doing this and you dig into the carrier a little bit. So you want to compare the old carrier bearings to the new ones. Just make sure they're the same size, so those look good. So keep in mind which race goes on which side. So we'll keep this one as this side. And we'll install this. You can use this old piece of the old bearing to actually help you install it. If you don't have a press to press these bearings on, you can actually use a seal installer or even be creative and use some sockets. You want to just have something that's going to push just on the center of this bearing. You don't want it pushing on the outside there. So we'll line this up. Okay, so we'll just hammer this on. If it starts going at an angle, take this center and then tap it where it's high, on the high spot. Now once we get close to the end, the bearing actually has to seat further down than the side of the carrier. So I'm gonna take the old bearing and just stick it on this seal installer like this. Generally, when you're doing this, all of a sudden, hammering it, it'll sound different. Yeah, it definitely sounded different. It's good. Then I'm gonna do the same with the other side. So when I cut this side off, I scored it a little bit more, and that's okay. It's not gonna cause any issues. It's still gonna work. And the reason why we cut it is so that it actually cracks, and that relieves some of the tension on the bearing. So as you can see, we cut it that much and then it cracked all the way up. And same with this one, just cutting it that little bit and there's a fine crack, and that just relieves it enough just to be able to pull the bearing off. All right, so I want to press in the bearing on the other side. I showed you how to hammer in this side, but before I do that, I don't want to just flip this over and have this flat on the press, because I could damage this bearing. The cage is taller than the bearing, so what I want to do is find something that's smaller than the bearing so that the cage doesn't push on it. And then I'm going to put that down first, flip this over, make sure that's centered on there. Now I can take this bearing and I'll take this piece from the old bearing, line this up. Take a block of something that'll fit under here on the press. Then gently start to press this on. If it starts going crooked, then loosen it up, reposition it. This is a little bit easier than hammering it on, but if you don't have a press, then this might not be an option. Press it on until it gets really difficult to press. And then just double check, make sure that air gap is gone. This one looks pretty good. Loosen up, and we're good to go. At this point, we want to take out the old races and we want to put the new ones in. These are the bearing races. These match to the bearing. You never want to reuse the old races because it's not meshed with the new bearings. So what we're going to do is take a punch and chisel it out. Chisel this one, the front one out from back here, and then this back one here will put a punch through the front of the case and use a hammer and punch it back. All right, so we're gonna chisel out the front race first. I'm just gonna use a long punch like this. And there's a little notch right there. It's kind of hard to see right there. Take that, and then we'll take a hammer and we're just gonna punch it out. And if there's another notch, this one doesn't have one, I'm just gonna go on the other side a little bit, give it a couple taps, just go back and forth. And there we go. There's the old race. Now from the front of the differential, I'm gonna go, and there's these same notches right here. I'm I'll just use the same punch and a hammer. Front one. You can actually see where it's a little bit worn. Okay, so before we put the new races in, you want to keep in mind right here and right here on this side, when we were using the punch would ride up against the side of the case right there and right there. So there's a little bit of a burr right there. What you want to do is we want to get rid of that. So you could take a file or a die grinder. We're going to use a little die grinder and just file that down, or even some sandpaper. You want to make it even with the rest of it. It's okay if you go a little bit low because there's so much surface area that the bearing race is going to sit on, so it'll be okay. Just keep in mind it's important that you look to make sure that that's not there. And same with the front one too. You're going to have to adjust if there was anything when you were hammering it out. If there's any marks on the front one, then we'll have to adjust as well. We're going to install the front race. You just take a little bit of gear oil, put it on there. You don't have to do this, but it'll make going in a lot easier. You can put it on the bearing, on the race. And then we're going to take a bearing installer like this, one that fits. Get this lined up. You want to make sure this is flush in there correctly. I'll take a hammer and just hammer it in. And you'll actually hear a difference when you're hammering it. Once you hear that difference, then you know it's probably all the way down. You still want to double check from the front of it and make sure there's no gap. If you can't see any gap, then you're good to go. So from the back side, you can see the race, and just make sure there's no air gap in between there and the case. And it looks like it's pretty good. Before we install the pinion and the new bearings into the differential case, some things you want to keep in mind. You want to make sure you put the seal back on before we install it, but also before we put the seal on, you're going to need to install this bearing and this spacer. This goes on the back side of the bearing. So when we install that, that's going to go first, and then the seal. We'll attach that, and then we're ready to insert the pinion. And you want to make sure you have the crush collar on the pinion. If you put this together without the crush collar, you're going to have to take it apart again. And you want to make sure you use a new crush collar. You can't reuse the old one. What the crush collar is going to do is keep tension between the two bearings so that there's a preload between the bearings. Basically, it's keeping the bearings pushed apart so much so that they're riding in the exact spot where they need to be. So once that's crushed down, it's exactly where it needs to be. And if you crush it too far, then and you loosen it up, you're not going to have the right tension on it. So you only get one shot at this. All right, I am going to take some gear oil. You can take some assembly lube and put it all over this bearing. Just work it into the bearing because you don't want it to go in dry. So take the bearing, slide that in. Then I'll take this spacer, that's going to go in next. Then we'll take the seal, get the seal in position. Okay, with that all set, take a seal installer. If you don't have a seal installer, sometimes a block of wood actually works even better. Just install this, use a hammer. Double check, make sure it's down all the way. The bearing's in there, and the spacer, so that's good. With the new pinion bearing on there, I'm going to take some gear oil and lubricate the pinion bearing. You can use assembly lube as well. All right, that's good. And double check, make sure you have your crush collar on at this time. Before you put the nut on for the pinion, it's a good idea to put a little bit of Loctite on the threads. Right there, some on the nut as well. So now I'm going to slide the pinion in. I may have to use my hand on the other side to position the bearing. Remember, this pinion is very heavy. Get that like that. Now I'm going to take my yoke, slide the yoke over the pinion, just like that. And I can't get to any threads, so what I'm going to have to do is hold the pinion. Just going to give this a tap. Take the new nut. Get that started. All right, so what we want to do is we want to prevent this pinion from spinning. So I'm going to use this tool. It's not the exact tool made for this, but it will work for us. I'm going to take one of these bolts from the yoke and install it on this tool. And I'll tighten it down with my 12 millimeter 12-point socket. So now that's on there nice and tight. So I can take a impact gun and the socket and tighten this down so it crushes that crush collar. So I'm going to use my impact gun and a 28 millimeter socket and tighten this up. I'm going to hold this bar as I tighten it. And I'm going to keep checking it, keep checking the play on it. So I still have a lot of play. I just got to keep going with this. You really need a powerful gun to be able to crush this crush collar. So just keep that in mind. Just keep checking it, going back, taking the gun and tightening it up. All right, so we're getting close. So just be careful. Just go back and forth. You can see that I'll be there soon. What you can normally do is, once it's starting to get tight, once there's no more play in there, you can take this and drop it, and normally it will just stop. One more. And that looks pretty good. All right. Just work that back and forth. Feels pretty good. Loosen this up. So the correct way to check this would be checking the drag on the pinion. What you'd want to do is take the socket and take a torque wrench that has a gauge on it, and you would want to spin this, and you'd want to see 20 inch-pounds on there. That's what the spec is. So if it was too light, then you'd want to go back and tighten that nut up a little bit more. I don't have a rotating torque wrench. This is a little bit on the loose side, so I'm just going to give it a couple more zaps. All right, that feels good. It's a little bit tighter, so not too tight. If it's too tight and you have to take it out, then you have to replace the crush collar. So just keep in mind, just do a little bit at a time. This is how you would check it, but you'd want to look at the gauge and see. So when you're looking at the carrier bearings or even the pinion bearings, you're going to want to take a look at the race. So here's the race from the pinion, and if you look at it, it looks pretty smooth. Up close, it looks, there's a little bit of wear, but not that much. A lot of times if you have a noise coming from the bearings, it'll be pitted, you'll see metal chunks missing, and you're going to look at the rollers as well. And on the rollers, you'll probably see some chunks taken out of the rollers. One thing you can't normally see is on the inner side of the bearing. Now this is with the rollers cut off of it. Sometimes there'll be chunks in there and you won't even be able to see that. So what you're going to want to do is take the race and just feel the bearing, just go back and forth. And this bearing actually feels pretty good. And you do the same with the pinion. Now with the pinion, obviously the race is going to be attached to the rear differential. So what you can do is just grab the pinion and just rotate it. You rotate it from the front, and you can see if you hear anything. And this one sounds pretty quiet. Right, before I install the carrier with the ring gear and bearings, I want to clean up this surface because it's going to be easier with everything out. So I'll just take a scraper, clean up all this RTV. All right, I'm just going to take some brake parts cleaner, clean this area up, just wipe it with a rag. So my plan is to reuse these factory shims. This one went on the left, this one went on the right. And I'm hoping everything lines up. If everything's good, then we'll be good to go. If it doesn't work with the factory shims, then we can take these shims, and there's different sizes here, and we'll have to measure the factory ones with a digital caliper, find out what size they are, and find the equal amounts on these, and we can add and subtract depending on which side, which way we need the ring gear to go. If we needed to go closer to the passenger side, we'll put less shims on this side. If we need it to go more towards the driver's side, put less shims on the driver's side. So before we install this, I'm going to take some gear oil and just put it on the bearings. Make sure we get those nice and lubricated. Same with the inner bearing. That's good. Now this is going to be heavy. I got to take the shims, put them on the outside of the bearings like that. Now just be careful and slide this in position. What I'm going to do is take a rubber mallet and just tap this in. Just going to take my punch and hammer and just tap this in a little more. You can beat the differential pretty hard. Just use a plastic hammer. I wouldn't take a sledge and hammer on this section or anything, but hitting on the shims is okay. Now we want to put these caps on and put the bolts in. And remember, on this driver's side, I had one dot at the top of this cap. So I'll slide that in there. Bottom bolt in. And the other side had two dots. Just make sure these are clean. Go in like that. Dots at the top. Right, now I'm going to use a torque wrench with a 19mm socket, and I'm going to torque these to 77 foot-pounds. Okay, so after torquing these caps on, I go to move my ring gear and there's no play, which that's not good. So, and if I grab the pinion and try to turn it, it's too tight. So I have to go ahead and take the shims out and then use the smaller shims and adjust. So right now the ring gear is too close to the pinion, so we want to back it up. So we're going to use a smaller shim on the driver's side and a bigger shim on the passenger side. If I take a digital caliper and I measure the shim that was on the driver's side, I'm at 0.280. And then take the shim that was on the passenger side, I can measure then. That one seems to be about 10 thousandths less, which we can actually switch these. We could take this one, put it on the driver's side, and take this one, put it on the passenger side, and see if that brings us back to where we were supposed to be. Or we can actually take these shims, which these are the universal ones, measure out and see how thick they are, and just put a thinner shims on this side and thicker ones on this side. And we're just gonna have to keep checking it and trying it and see what works for us. All right, so I torqued these caps back down, and I actually have 0 backlash, which isn't good, but it actually moves. So we're getting there. So I just need to take more out on this side, put more shims on that side. So the shim on the driver's side is 0.266. So what I want to do is take these shims. Now there's shims in the middle here. You can separate. And then this shim goes on the outside. Check this, and this will be 0.258. I want a little bit less than that. I want to take about 10 thousandths off. Take one of these little ones out. Put this back together. 2.48. It's a little less than I wanted. Okay, so 0.250. So we're going to try that, and then we'll add the difference on this side. So we took out 15 thousandths from this side, added 15 thousandths to this side, and now we actually have backlash, which is good. And it spins all the way with the pinion. So now we're going to check the backlash, make sure it's within spec, and go from there. So I have my gauge set up, and I have it zeroed out. And if I just rotate this slightly, about 6 thousandths, which is a little on the low side. I want it closer to 10. I'm going to take one more 5 thousandths shim out of here and stick it on this side, and that's just going to shift it over just a little bit, and we'll check it again. Okay, so we set this up again and put our gauge on, and we're just checking the backlash, and we have about 8 thousandths, which is awesome. That's exactly where we want to be. You don't want to be too high, you don't want to be over 12 thousandths, and you don't want to be much under 7 thousandths. So 8 thousandths is awesome, so we're going to send it like that. In case you don't understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about backlash and this measurement right here, what it is the ring gear and the pinion, there's an air gap between the two, and if that air gap is too tight, then when all these components heat up, it's going to bind up and cause a lot of wear. And then if the air gap is too loose, then you're going to get clunking while you're accelerating and decelerating. So that is why it's important to have this adjustment adjusted properly. So we have the backlash set up, so we're good there. So now we want to check the pattern. So I'm going to take some gear marking compound and a small brush. Just mark this up. I'm going to mark it up on both sides of the ring gear. Okay, now we're going to check the pattern. I'm going to have a friend turn the pinion while I use the pry bar, and I'm going to put a little pressure on it. And what the pressure is doing is making it so the pattern's going to spread a little bit better. Otherwise, if you just do it freewheeling, then it's not going to have as good of a pattern. All right, you can stop. Now we're going to go the other direction. So now I'm going to pry from the top. All right, go ahead. First, we're going to look at this side. Now, this area right here is where the pinion was contacting the ring gear. Now, this is the drive side, so when you're accelerating going forward, this is where it is pushing on the ring gear. Now, ideally, I would have rather it been closer to the middle, but that actually looks pretty good where it is. It's a nice pattern, it's nice contact, it's oval, it's not coming off the edge, which it looks really good. And then if I looked at the coast side, there's a nice oval on this side as well. And it's pretty close to where I want it to be. Ideal would have been closer to the middle, but that looks pretty good. If our pattern didn't look as good and we actually had to make adjustments, what we would want to do is change the shims for the pinion. So when you're installing the pinion, we guessed and we put the factory shim on here, but you would have to pull this all apart, take the bearing off, put the different size shim on, and reinstall it. Now they do make kits to find out which shims you need. Obviously that's a Ford factory part. We don't have that, so we didn't have that tool to check, so we did the best we could and just guessed. I'm just going to take a rag and wipe some of this up. So now I want to rotate this to this position because I'm going to install the axles, and I'm going to want to put the C-clips back in. All right, so I'm going to slide the axle in. Be careful not to ruin the seal. Just going to hold it up a little bit. These are new seals. If you pulled this apart and they weren't new seals, you might want to install new seals. You just have to pull the axle down a little bit so that it lines up. And you really don't want to rotate it, you just want to push it on. Just take a hammer and give it a little tap. Now I'll take this C-clip, slide that in position right there. Now just take a little pry bar, come over here, just pry the axle out, and just make sure that that's in the proper position, like that. Looks good, and I'll do the same with the other side. Before we slide this pin in, I just want to get this bolt that secures the pin in ready. I'm just going to put a little thread locker on these threads. Get that ready. You can slide the pin in. Just rotate this. You give it a little tap. Just like that. Take the pin, slide this in, just like that. I'm just gonna grab a 3/8 socket and a ratchet, and we'll just snug this up. And we can use a torque wrench, and as I hold the ring gear, I'm gonna torque this to 22 foot-pounds. Now I'm gonna reinstall the axle, the drive axle. I did mark the axle where it goes on the pinion, on the yoke, so make sure that lines up. I'm going to take the 12 millimeter socket and extension and just tighten these down. And I'm going to take a torque wrench and I'm going to torque these to 41 foot-pounds. Torque these bottom three, and then what I'm going to have to do to get to the top one, because you can't get there with a socket, I'm going to have to put the vehicle into neutral, rotate the drive shaft, and then torque that one as well. So we want to clean the cover off, just wipe out any excess fluid. Just use a rag, and I'm just going to take a razor blade. You can use a scraper. I'm going to scrape off any of this excess RTV. So I'm just going to take some brake parts cleaner, clean this off, and take a rag, let this all down. All right, with a little bit of parts cleaner and a rag, I'm just going to wipe this down one more time. Now that our surfaces are clean, I can take some RTV or gasket maker, just put a small bead, not too thick, and go around the holes. I go around one time and then go back and do the other sides of the bolt holes. Oh, stuff smells like vinegar. All right, now I'm going to go back and go around the outsides of the holes, just like that, go all the way around. So now this is all gooped up, we're ready to put the cover back on. Slide this in position, just like that. And there's two bolts that have studs on the end. One goes right there, and one goes right here. So I'll get those started first, and take the other bolts and get those all started. Actually, there's three with studs on it, and here's where the other one goes. There. And I'll take my 1/2-inch socket and a ratchet and start snugging these down. I like to go across from one another, so tighten it down evenly. Now I'm going to go back around and torque these bolts to 33 foot-pounds. Just went around again and torque them. They're good. Take this wire harness and slide these on those studs. All right, so while I let that rear cover dry, I'm going to put the brakes back together. Take the rotor, line that back up in position. And we'll take the caliper off the hanger. Before I install the caliper, I'm going to have to slide this caliper bolt in that has this extra damper on it. This one goes on the top. Slide it in a little bit. Then we'll slide the caliper at the lower part of the brake pads first. And slide that on like that. Then I can take the other caliper bolt, slide that in position. We're gonna tighten these down. I'm just using a 10mm wrench on this top one with the damper. You can't get a socket on there. Ideally, if you could torque this, you would want to torque this to 22 foot-pounds. The 10mm socket and the torque wrench. Just torque this to 22 foot-pounds. Now I'll put the tire on. And the lug nuts. I'll take the socket and just snug these down. Now I'm going to use a 21mm socket and a torque wrench. I'm going to torque these lug nuts to 150 foot-pounds, and I'm going to torque them in a star pattern so that the wheel gets tightened down evenly. Just go around again, make sure it's all good. Then I'm going to do the same procedure on the other side. I want to remember to add my fluid. Before I add gear oil to this vehicle has a limited slip differential, so I'm going to use limited slip additive first. I want to put that in before I put the actual gear oil in. Now I can add the appropriate gear oil. So I got the fluid full enough so that it's just draining out the fill plug. So I'm just going to let that drain for a little bit. You want it right up to the bottom of the fill plug. All right, I'm going to take the fill plug, put it on my extension with my ratchet, and I'm just going to put a little bit of pipe sealer on here. That's going to just help it seal up a little bit better. Take that fill plug, get that started, and with my ratchet extension, just going to snug this up. Once it starts slowing down, then just give it another like quarter turn. That's pretty good. You don't want to tighten it too much where it actually goes into the case or cracks the case. So now I'm gonna take some brake parts cleaner and just clean this all off. Because we disconnected the brakes, we're gonna want to pump the brake pedal just to make sure everything's tight. There could be an air gap between the rear calipers and the brake pads. So if it feels tight, just make sure you do that before you take it for a ride.
Thanks for watching. Visit 1AAuto.com for quality auto parts shipped to your door, the place for DIY auto repair. And if you enjoyed this video, please click the subscribe button.